Joseph, pronouns are he, him, from California, is a theist who wants to talk about how believing in God is good because it gives him boundaries. So, Joseph, welcome to the Hang Up. You're on with Matt and Jim.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Matt. Well, my
Hey.
reasons are kind of selfish, when it comes to Christianity. I was born a Catholic, raised in the church, and all that. But then later on in life, I decided I didn't believe in God anymore. And I kind of ran amok. I got tired of going every Saturday to the confessionals and confessing to some guy what I did and telling him about what I did, and I just got tired of it. I went out on my own, and all I got was problems. I got all kinds of problems, drinking problems, assault problems, all kinds of problems. My life just ran amok. And I went to the courts and all that stuff, and they told me I had to go to an AA program, and then there I got introduced back to God again, and started using the concept of, I got to, for what I do, I got to be accountable for my actions, which I didn't care. I didn't care who I hurt, what I did. Said take one, I take 30. You know what I mean? I was down.
Right.
So I need boundaries. I'm one of those types that have to have something. Now, my motives for Christianity are strictly selfish. I like the concept, even if there isn't a God, the concept that you gotta be accountable for what you do, and you don't want to hurt other people. I go with that concept, but me on my own, I can't do that. So that's why I'm compelled to believe.
If God doesn't exist, what's keeping you accountable if God doesn't exist right now?
Well, that's what it took to get my attention, and I needed accountability. You know what I'm saying? So I have to talk to people and realize that I'm not here to hurt people. But I didn't care before. But now I do care about my realization that there's a reason, and my reason is not here to destroy people. It's to help people, like the guy said. And I like the concept of Christianity, but I have my doubts about God, existence at times. Then again, I say, well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. So I'm kind of like on a fence, but.
Yeah, you haven't really answered my question though. If God doesn't exist, what is holding you accountable, and how does your belief in God existing keeping you accountable?
That's the thing. If when I believed God did not exist, I said I had no parameter or nothing. I'd do anything. I didn't care what I did when I thought that. When I realized God doesn't exist.
But what's keeping you accountable now? How is God keeping you accountable now?
Myself.
Well, the fact that He might be there. And I don't want being 74 years old at the end of my life, and
So fear is the only thing keeping you accountable.
Well, you might say, yeah. I guess, yes. I guess the fear of if there is a hell, I don't want to go there.
So why wasn't fear? Yeah.
Go ahead.
When I was an atheist, I didn't. If I wasn't going to hell, then I'd have nothing right. I could do whatever I wanted. Run self-will, run riot, do whatever you want. Who cares? You do whatever you want. You don't get caught. You're all right. But I got caught a bunch of times, and I got put in all kinds of programs to try to help people. None of those programs worked for me. The only thing that worked for me.
See, this is
church. No, but I'm not saying church works for me either.
So this is what's confusing me about what you're. This is what's confusing me about what you're saying now is fear of hell is keeping you in line now, and you can't really demonstrate that hell exists. So it's fear of something you don't know is keeping you in line now, but a fear of actually going to jail and being convicted of something didn't stop you. And those are all real things that happen and did happen to you. Again, I don't understand what is keeping you accountable now that wasn't keeping you accountable before, other than just some vague fear about you can't prove exists.
Well, before I didn't care. I was so after like I said, I was raised a Christian. When I became an atheist, I didn't care about anything. I just ran amok.
Right, but you said right, but you said you didn't fear going.
Drugs and all that.
Right, but again, you said you didn't fear. You had consequences to your actions, but you didn't fear those consequences. Now you fear consequences. Does it really matter if it's hell or going to jail? I mean, why was the fear not working then and it is working now?
because then I wasn't thinking about death. Now I'm thinking more about death than I did when I was younger. I never thought about death. All I thought about was having fun. So my mind wasn't worried about what's going to happen. So I just said I'm going to have as much fun as I can. So, there ain't no God, and I really believe that. I really convinced myself there was no God. And then I became
the other side of this is both Matt and I are atheists, and neither one of us are out doing the things you're doing. So it wasn't the fear of God; it was a fear of. You just didn't have any fear of consequences, and you didn't care about the consequences. Well, no, we just understand their consequences, and we're more scared of them. But Matt and I are also getting up there in age. But I'm not fearing what's going to happen after I die, because I know what's going to happen after I die, right? Worms are going to crawl in, they're going to crawl out, they're going to play pinochle about my snout. That's just what's going to happen. We're going to decompose and etc. But I still see, I think you're choosing to think that there's something after death and you don't want to go to hell. But now, because now all of a sudden you fear consequences, before you didn't. What is it about the fear of hell?
Or before I never about the now.
Hang on, Joseph. Joseph,
programs didn't work for me.
Joseph,
But when I went to
Joseph,
church
stop.
and started reading the Bible,
Joseph, Joseph. Stop interrupting and let Jim finish his question, please.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to get you to see that the only thing that is holding you accountable is you. You have decided you don't want to do any of that stuff anymore, right? Because your fear of consequences doesn't matter.
All right, Joseph, you are now muted.
Yeah.
You are now muted. Nobody will be able to hear you at all until I unmute you. And I'm not going to unmute you until Jim finishes his thought so that you don't interrupt it.
Mike Bell.
Right. And the reason I can say that you don't fear consequences still is because you didn't fear consequences then. And those consequences were much more immediate than someday I'm going to die, right? Those consequences were, you had to get caught, you had to go through the court system, et cetera. But those consequences were much more real than now. You have decided to be a good person now.
Mike Bell.
Not because of consequences, but because you have just made that decision. Because if it was consequences, the real consequences would have stopped you when you were younger. Is that you didn't care about the consequences,
Mike?
Right?
Bell.
You made a choice to not care. Now you're making a choice to care. It's your choice, right?
Mike Bell.
Right.
So you're choosing to be a good person. Congratulations,
Mike Bell.
Well, before I didn't care. I guess maybe because I was so young and wild and
I agree
so
with
much
you. You
hormone.
didn't care about being a good person. Now you care about being a good person.
Hang on.
Yeah. So it has nothing to do with consequences. You're choosing to be a good person today.
Now I am. Yes.
Yeah, Joseph.
Right. And that's all that's keeping you accountable is you.
Joseph, why do you care about Joseph? Why do you care about consequences now when you didn't care about them before?
Mike Bell.
Because I didn't believe God existed. I was thoroughly convinced he didn't exist.
Don't.
Now I'm kind of saying maybe there is a God.
You still don't. You still don't believe that God existed. You flatly said at the beginning of this.
I go back and forth, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Stop interrupting when I'm pointing out your fallacies and in your thinking. So you're not convinced that a God exists, but you are afraid that there might be a hell, and out of the fear of a possible hell, you're now willing to act like a better person. Why can't you just be a better person? Why isn't it enough to be accountable to your fellow human being? Why isn't that enough?
I don't know. I just have that destructive, that personality to just keep going. Not anymore, but now I'm older. But when I was younger, I didn't care about anything.
That seems to be a cowardly give up answer to just say, I don't know why I don't care about being decent, but I don't. And that's fine if you don't. But I find this to be a fiction that people put up regularly saying, oh, I would not be a good person unless I thought there was a God who was going to punish me forever afterwards. I generally don't think that's true for most people. If it's true for you, by all means, keep on believing. You don't have a single rational reason. You don't have a sound argument. You don't have evidence. You just have, I'm going to be a shit to anybody and everybody but I've decided not to be just in case there's a hell. That is one of the most depressingly sad things I've ever heard, because it doesn't address whether or not there's a God. It's just you saying, I'm terrible. I don't care if I'm terrible, but just in case there is a God, I'm going to act like I'm not terrible. Do you think you can fool God?
Mike
I'm
Bell.
not saying that's what I used to be like. I'm not like that anymore. When I was younger, I was that way, but for the last 30 years, I haven't been
still
that
that
way.
way. You're still that way. You're still that way.
No,
You're just pretending.
no, I'm not.
Mike
You,
Bell.
no,
you
I'm
are
not.
by your own admission and what you've said. You are still that way, and you are just pretending. You are saying,
No,
I would have if it weren't for the threat of hell, which you do not know to be real. You would have no reason to not be awful. That's what you've said.
Mike Bell. Mike
I
Bell.
said at that time, but I told you at that time I was a complete atheist. Now I'm not a complete atheist anymore. I lean more towards there might be. You understand
There's not
what
a
I'm saying?
lean towards.
Before
You're either
when I was
convinced.
a
No,
complete
there's
atheist,
no,
I didn't
Joseph.
care
No,
about any.
Joseph. There's
I
not
do
a
care
lean
now. I
towards.
care now.
No,
I do care
Joseph.
now.
No,
Trying to help
fucking
people, which I
Joseph.
shouldn't
Shut
do.
the fuck up and let me finish my thought. No, Joseph, you don't lean one way. You are either convinced that there is a God who will send you to hell, or you are not convinced. Now, you might go back and forth on it day to day or whatever, but that's an admission that you would still do terrible. Here, Joseph, would you do terrible things if you were convinced that there wasn't a hell?
Mike Bell. Mike Bell. Mike Bell. Mike
Not
Bell.
now because I'm too old. I can't. I'm stuck home and I'm paralyzed, so I can't do
There
nothing
you
but lay
go.
in bed.
Oh, my God.
There you go.
Okay.
Joseph,
That's the reality of oh.
Joseph, if you weren't fucking stuck in bed and paralyzed, and you did not think there was a hell, which you're not necessarily convinced of, would you still do bad things?
Mike
I really
Bell.
don't know because I'm not there and I'll never be there.
Oh, my God. All right.
Well, it's the truth.
Joseph,
I mean,
Joseph
I don't know.
cannot-
I said, no, Matt.
No,
Listen,
I'm
Matt.
done,
look,
Joseph.
I got nothing
I'm
against
done,
you. I got
Joseph.
nothing against you.
I'm-
what works for
I'm
me ain't
done,
gonna work for other
Joseph,
people,
because-
you know?
All right, now I'm going to fucking mute you. I'm done, Joseph, because you're saying that you had no way to stop being terrible until you became convinced that there was a God who might punish you in hell. But then you go back and forth. You're agnostic. Maybe there is a God, maybe there's not a God. Maybe there is a hell, maybe there's not a hell. And so then my question becomes, so you're saying you would still do those things if it weren't for hell, because hell was your only reason. And then late in a 12-minute conversation, you decide to say, no, now I have a new reason to not do bad things because I'm paralyzed and living in bed. Well, I'm asking about your character. I'm not asking about your fucking mobility. You don't get to cop out and be cowardly and say, well, maybe I'm still the same person. Maybe I'm not. I won't know because I'm stuck in bed. If that's the case, then you don't need God. You just need to stay in bed and continue to be convinced that you would do bad things to people if it weren't for the fact that you are incapable of doing it. So after spending all this time in a discussion where your only justification for not doing harm to yourself and others was the fear of hell, now when I try to come up with a scenario that removes that so we can actually use our brains and think and evaluate what our motivations are and what our desires are, you then come up with something else to avoid dealing with your desires. You avoid dealing with what you truly want to do and who you truly are by either saying the threat of hell prevents me or being paralyzed prevents me. Either way, you seem to be completely afraid and unwilling to do some introspection and figure out who you are and what you want to do, which, by the way, I'm going to unmute you in just a second. If I were still a Christian,
Mike Bell.
let me move my glasses. I would point out that you, sir, are a terrible Christian. Christianity is about the truth of Christ the Redeemer.
Mike Bell.
It's not about trying to avoid hell or consequences. You can't fool a God. And if your only reason for doing that is the threat of hell, you're not a good person, and you never were, and you never will be, and Christianity didn't make you one, and you're not going to be able to fool a God. So you've gone from, I don't care about anybody, to, well, Christianity makes me want to act like I care about people, so I will, to, yeah, but now I'm stuck in bed paralyzed, so I don't even have to bother doing an inventory of myself. So here you are in late life, and you're sitting here going, yeah, I think I fooled myself into thinking I'm a better person. Well, you didn't fool me. And I don't think you fooled a God.
And just to continue with that line of thought, you are still avoiding the consequences of your choices. You became an atheist, then you decided to do a bunch of bad stuff. The two things are not related. You made choices, then you made a choice to become a Christian, in at least name only, and now you're blaming God for the choices you're continuing to make. When do you accept that you make good choices and you make bad choices, not whether you're an atheist, not whether you're a theist, but you yourself are responsible for your choices?
Well, this is what I'm going to tell you, okay? The night I got in my accident, I was bringing diapers and formula and food to somebody that didn't have anything, and that's the night I got hit by a car. I started changing my life. Okay, now most of my life was horrible, but I did change. I came to the point where I did change, you know, and that's where I'm at now. And I wish I'd have done this a long time ago, but I told you I was raised in a very violent town, you know, and I was around violent. Around a lot of drug
again, you're not answering the question. When are you going to take responsibility for the choices you make?
Meanwhile, what you're saying is you were terrible. You turned your life around, and while you were out trying to deliver diapers to somebody, God decided to put you in a car accident and cripple you.
Mike Bell.
I didn't do it. I did it to myself. I didn't, you know, he didn't do it. God didn't do that.
Did God
I
create?
didn't pay attention when I came out of the driveway. You know, I'm going to take the snap myself. I'm not going to blame anybody else.
Did God create the universe?
Mike Bell.
Well, according to the Bible, he did.
You know what?
But I can't.
Mike Bell.
No, Joseph. We're done having a conversation because you are not ready to have an honest conversation. If I ask you, did God create the universe? And you're like, according to the Bible, he did. I didn't ask you, does the Bible say God created the universe? I fucking know what the Bible says. I know it better than you do. I'd bet my life on it.
Mike Bell.
I was asking you what you believe. And here's the reality.
I believe there's God. I really believe there's a God.
No, you don't.
Now, I do.
No, you don't.
I believe there's a God.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
You know
You're
what?
just a liar.
There was other times in the Bible. There was some
Joseph,
people
you're
that
a liar. I don't believe anything you say. Prove you're not a liar.
Yeah.
Prove you're not lying.
Mike Bell. Mike Bell.
Well, because I'm coming here and talking, facing willing to subject myself in front of all these listeners. Why would I come up if I wanted to lie?
No, you're not.
I don't want to lie. I just want to. I just want to tell you that without it, I'm no good. Okay,
no,
that
you're no good with it. You're no good with it. You're no good with it. You're no good with it.
I need it. I need it.
You know, you're not a liar. Prove you're not a liar.
Now,
prove you're not a liar.
Shows like yours,
I'm not in the conversation, Matt.
Prove you're not a liar.
There are good. You don't have to be a Christian to be good.
Prove you're not a liar.
That, you know, I love all people now. At one time I didn't, you know, and I love you guys.
You're not a liar. Here, look, I'm going to mute you. I'm going to unmute you, and then I'm going to ask you to prove you're not a liar. And whether or not you attempt to prove you're not a liar is going to determine whether or not you stay on this show for 1 second longer. Here we go. Joseph, prove you're not a liar.
Mike
How do
Bell.
I prove that?
Goodbye. Not my problem.
I mean, yeah, his atheism, neither his atheism nor his theism caused any of his actions. He made choices, he made bad choices, and now he wants to blame God for making good choices and blame atheism for making bad choices. He made the choices no matter how you cut it.
It's one of those things where if you're not able to figure out, hey, is there a God? Well, I believe there's a God. Do you, though?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you believe just because you fear hell? That is also not a good reason to believe.
See, I've heard this stuff before, and I fully acknowledge. I mean, I used to be a believer. I've heard countless people step up in front of the church and say, I was a terrible human being. I was a godless person. I cared only about myself. I didn't have any reason not to hurt people. I didn't have any reason not to hurt myself. I did all those things, and I had no reason to take accountability. And then Jesus fixed me. Except that most of them
Mike Bell
have a testimony about how God did an overwhelming work in their lives that transformed who they are as a person,
Mike Bell,
changed them from the person who would do this, not because there was a fear of hell, but because they became convicted that it was wrong, that the moral foundation of God, of the universe, convicted them in their sin.
Mike Bell,
Joseph was a shitty Christian.
Mike Bell, Mike Bell, Mike Bell, Mike Bell,
That's my perspective as a former Christian.
Mike Bell,
Joseph was a shitty Christian and still is.
Mike Bell, Mike Bell,
It's a shame that I have to be the godless heathen here, the only one of me and Joseph who understands what Christianity is about and understands what redemption is and understands what a turning away from a sinful life looks like. It's not, well, now there's fucking consequences, so I guess I'll go deliver some diapers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's take responsibility for the decisions you make.
Mike Bell,
Don't blame a position
Mike Bell,
like atheism on you making bad decisions. Just
Mike Bell.
anyway.
It was nice though, because you were doing the same thing I was going to do from a slightly different perspective, which was you're like, okay, what are you accountable to? Well, I'm accountable to God and hell. No, I mean, you're not even necessarily convinced of that. Why wasn't it enough to be accountable to your fellow human beings? Why weren't the consequences, the raw consequences of your action enough? First of all, I've never
He
murdered
experienced
anybody.
real consequences. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never murdered anybody. And the reason I don't murder people doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's illegal or that there might be social consequences with it. I don't murder people because I have no desire to murder people.
Yeah.
Because I recognize that my right to not be murdered is contingent on me affording that same right to everybody else. I can, from a purely selfish standpoint, subscribe to a moral position and be a better moral person than Joseph can by appealing to God.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and I only became a woodworker for the puns. That's not important. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on our Patreon or as a channel member, and you can actually support specific shows and specific hosts in special tiers on those. Check those options out. Also, you can leave a super thanks and get a little highlighted deal. But if all else fails, you can always you can subscribe and leave a comment. Now, here are some suggestions because I don't care about the algorithm. I am the algorithm. Bye.